Hello and welcome to the ninth episode of Ghost Creatures and Scares Oh My.
A podcast where we share our love of the show Supernatural and dive into the fascinating and terrifying real life legends behind the ghosts and creatures featured in each episode of Supernatural.
This episode is called Poltergeists, and we explore the real life creepy tales of these malevolent and often mischievous spirits.
So each week we very quickly recap the episode of Supernatural. We're still on to season one, and we focus and dive in on the creature or the entity that's featured on that episode. So this week we're looking at episode 9 of season one, and the episode is called Home.
In this episode, a new family has moved into Sam and Dean's childhood home, but are plagued by ghostly disturbances. Meanwhile, Sam is haunted by a vision of this family trapped in his childhood home and convinces a reluctant Dean that they need to go home. Together, they discover a malevolent poltergeist has inhabited the house and set out to exorcise it.
Yeah, so it's a good episode, this one, isn't it? Of what I can remember.
I'm gonna be honest, it's not one of my favourite ones.
You know, you know why? Is it because they veer off the kind of individual monster, and I find sometimes the overall arc a little bit. Ugh.
No, no, I really enjoy it, but I do much prefer the episodes where it's a specific monster that they're going out to hunt, or
I
if
hate
they're
the
going out
dad.
to get like specific. Whoa,
I don't like the dad. I love
so
the actor, but I don't like the dad.
why?
I don't know. I feel like he brings the show down.
It certainly doesn't. John makes the show.
No, I do. I love him on Walking Dead, but I think the episodes that he's in, I don't know. I feel like he causes bother between the two
Absolute
boys.
slander. He does cause bother
He
between the
does.
boys,
Like,
but
yeah,
obviously that's part of the character.
I feel like, right,
Slander
yeah,
saying
but
that you
I'm
don't
being
like John.
funny.
How dare you?
Right, it's horrific what happens to the mum. But if you were then to like, if that happened to me and you were to do what he does and just abandon our daughter, like, I wouldn't thank you for it.
Doesn't abandon anybody.
He does, kind of.
No, he trains them to survive. He
Oh, I mean,
train,
dogs.
he trains them up, keeps them safe, and
Yeah.
then when they get old enough, Sam leaves, goes to
No,
college because
because
that's what he wants to
there's a
do.
few episodes where they have flashbacks and, you know, they're eating cereal in the motel and it's all very,
Where
oh,
he's took off and went to kill a monster and stuff. I bet he leaves Dean with a shotgun.
oh God, great parenting. Anyway, so we're getting off track there. We're going to be looking at Poltergeist today. I've just told you I've never seen Poltergeist. Poltergeist. Is it Poltergeist or Poltergeist?
I would have said
We
poltergeist.
say poltergeist. So anyway, in ghost lore, a poltergeist is German for rumbling ghost or a noisy spirit. It's a type of ghost or spirit that is responsible for physical disturbances, such as loud noises and objects being moved or destroyed. Most claims or fictional descriptions of poltergeists show them as being capable of pinching, biting, hitting, and tripping up people. They are also depicted as capable of the movement or levitation of objects, such as furniture and cutlery, or noises such as knocking on doors. Foul smells are also associated with poltergeist occurrences, as well as spontaneous fires and different electrical issues such as flickering lights. They have traditionally been described as troublesome spirits who haunt a particular person instead of a specific location. Some variation of poltergeist folklore is found in many different cultures. Early claims of spirits that supposedly harass and torment their victims date back to the 1st century, but references to poltergeist became more common in the early 17th century. So I think there's a very clear distinction between normal spirit ghosts and poltergeist.
Poltergeist are little pests.
They're not demons. They were human. They have walked the earth, like unlike demon spirits. But you know where ghosts will just appear, and sometimes ghosts don't even know what they are. They're just if there are anything at all, they're just energy repeating. It's the same like loop. Whereas poltergeists don't tend to haunt a location. They tend to haunt a specific person and feed off the energy and really cause bother in the house.
Mr. Boots was close to one really from the
Oh,
last
is he
episode
got
where he's chucking
traumatized?
stuff
He
and
got
that.
power to throw rocks, and he
Maybe,
is,
but
isn't
he
he?
obviously he haunts a specific location rather than a
Oh
person.
yeah, so maybe that's a distinction. So the Poltergeist film, like a very famous cult horror film, isn't it?
I think it was remade as well, though, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah, it was. I mean, I can't put my finger on the date or the actors who were in it, but
No.
it was more famous in obviously Poltergeist. It's a 1982 American supernatural horror film directed by Tobe Hopper and co-written and produced by Steven Spielberg. Didn't know that.
No, no, I didn't.
It is the first and most successful entry into the Poltergeist film series. Set in a Californian suburb, the plot focuses on a family whose home is invaded by malevolent ghosts that abduct the family's youngest daughter. So yeah, I think in this one, again, it's not one of my favorite films, but I think it zones in on the young daughter, doesn't it? So it's
Aye.
attracted to us. It's always one person it feeds energy off.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was a series. I knew they had remade it, but
No, I think it means Poltergeist film series is in any films about Poltergeist. It
All
was,
right.
I think it's the most successful entry in like any film about Poltergeist, I
Yeah.
think. Interestingly, I put this one in. I haven't delved too much into this because I'd like to keep this story for a future episode because it's really, really interesting. But have you heard of the Curse of the Poltergeist film?
Yeah, I think we watched it on that
The
series
Cursed
on Netflix,
films.
wasn't it? Yeah, all right.
That was no, it wasn't on Netflix. It was on what's that one? Shutter. We had a free trial for
All right.
Shutter.
Is
It
that
was
through
it was
Prime on it?
Cursed Films,
All
yeah.
right.
So Heather O'Rourke, who is the child actress who plays the little girl, she died from an operation in the complications shortly after filming Rap, which is really sad. And Dominique Dunn, I think she was the older sister in the film. She was actually murdered by an ex-partner who stalked her, which is like really awful. There were other deaths of cast members occurred after filming as well, with some of the actors complaining that it was due to Spielberg. This now, I do remember this now. I do remember it was Spielberg because basically there was a scene, a really infamous scene of the film. I think it's in like the garden or there's like a pool or something, and there's loads of skeletons. So Spielberg refused to use prop skeletons, and he actually apparently used real.
Real Remains.
Yeah, but I think that's an urban legend, and apparently people say because he did that. We kind of briefly mentioned that on last week's episode, didn't we? The ancient Indian burial
Like
ground trope.
disturbing it and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so apart from Poltergeist, what other films do you know that have got Poltergeist in?
The Conjuring.
Yeah, nice answer.
Paranormal. Well, I suppose Paranormal Activity is a demon, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Is it? Yes, it's not a
Yeah,
Poltergeist.
it's a
Yeah,
demon.
but it acts like I think it's hard to distinguish sometimes.
Yeah. Until later on, when the films normally get stupid and you see the
You see
demon
the
and all
demon
looks
like an
stupid.
Insidious, yeah,
Uh,
and yeah. Well,
I
we're gonna.
suppose Insidious with that little kid,
Which one?
the one who's jumping around at the thing, turning the music on and off. Although he doesn't really ever chuck anything, does he?
No,
Probably just a ghost.
he's just a good. The thing with them is, oh, you could say because they're all attracted to the little boy who is a Dalton. He's in the
Hmm.
coma,
Aye.
and they want to get into his body to take it over. So
Aye.
potentially, I don't know, not sure. I'll leave that one there. But we're going to dive into a really famous case of a poltergeist haunting is the Enfield haunting. So you might have heard of this because it does appear in the Conjuring franchise of films, and there's lots of TV adaptations, and there's also a few really good documentaries about this. It's really fascinating.
Hmm.
It's a really well-known one, so you might already know this one. So I've taken this from the site allthat'sinteresting.com. I think they really write some excellent pieces. In The Conjuring 2, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren travel to England to investigate the Enfield haunting. Though the film is fictional, the alleged haunting in North London did actually take place in the 1970s. During that time, a single mother named Peggy Hodgson and her four children reported a series of bizarre incidents that happened at their home. More than 30 eyewitnesses later backed them up, describing items that flew through the air, matches that spontaneously burst into flames, and the voice of an old man that spoke through one of Hodgson's young daughters. This one, the reason I've put this one in is because every single week I'll put a story in and you can't really convince you. But this one, there were so many different people who's experienced this poltergeist activity that a lot of people think it was real.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the ones out there which you would have to say has the most evidence for being real and it can't really be explained.
Hmm.
But then, obviously, the daughter does come out and say, like, the two of them say that they were making some stuff up, doesn't
Some of
it?
it,
Which
yeah.
then chucks the entire thing into, like, question, in it? But,
We'll come to that later, yeah. But I was going to mention that on one occasion, allegedly, police who came to the scene to that answered reports of the strange goings on, they apparently saw the table and chairs fly across the room,
hmm
which really, I mean, not only are they other adults, they are police officers, which kind of gives it a bit of credence.
yeah.
Okay, so according to Peggy Hodgson, I don't know why I can't say her name, Peggy Hodgson, the haunting of her home at 284 Green Street, Enfield in North London, began in August of 1977. Peggy, who lived there with her four children, Margaret 12, Janet 11, Johnny 10, and Billy 7, claimed that she first knew something was up after there was a crash coming from upstairs. When Peggy went to investigate, she found Margaret and Janet cowering in the corner of their bedroom. We told our mum the chest of drawers was moving toward the bedroom door, Janet had said. She had said to us, "Oh, don't be silly." But the chest then slid across the room. I just couldn't believe it, Peggy said. In fact, I pushed it back twice, and the third time I couldn't move it. As a strange knocking seemed to spread through the house, Peggy went to get help. She first reached out to a neighbour and then the police. So I remember this one because on the film, yes, it's been exaggerated, but they had nice neighbours who came over to help as well.
Sorry, just a quick side note there. You went full teacher reading voice
Did
as you were going through it.
I did
It was
tend to
funny.
do that.
You can quick change around and how you go. I think Peggy said.
He said, "Okay, everyone." um,
um,
but
no, yeah. I mean, it does start getting like stuff getting chucked around the room and stuff, isn't it?
yeah, the neighbours also witnessed this as well as the police
Hmm.
officers. So when police constable Caroline Heaps arrived on the scene, she said that she witnessed a chair moving on its own. It came off the floor, maybe a half inch, I should say, Heaps remembered, and I saw it slide off to the right about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. As time went on, the strange events at 284 Green Street seemed to escalate. Graham Morris, a Daily Mirror photographer who visited the house at the family's request, described chaos, saying, "Things started flying around, people were screaming. Morris himself got hit by a flying Lego. Mr. Boots!
Not again.
Eerily, the Enfield poltergeist seemed particularly focused on 11-year-old Janet. I was used and abused, Janet recalled. Some unknown force, she said, yanked her through the air and forced her to levitate. Additionally, just Janet began speaking in the gravelly voice of an older man. So this gives it a sinister edge, I think, because apparently this poltergeist was an old elderly man who lived in the house before and died in the house. And the fact that the daughter, she's an 11-year-old, feels as though she was like abused by this ghost, it gives it a horrible kind of side note, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it is. Yeah, I mean, it was chucking her across the room and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not the best.
Yeah. So just before I died, I went blind and then I had a hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in the chair in the corner downstairs, the voice said through Janet on recorded audio. Chillingly, a former occupant of the house named Bill Wilkins had died in the exact same way years earlier. His son came forward and said, "Yeah, that was my dad's house. He died exactly how this girl's described it." And he wasn't like a well-known man, so how would she? It wasn't like she would have read it in the paper. I mean, you wouldn't have thought,
Yeah,
unless someone at school said, "Oh, I know someone who died in that house." So how did she know that? By 1978, the so-called Enfield Haunting had attracted the attention of American paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. As depicted in the Conjuring 2 film, the Warrens came to England to investigate. Though their involvement was not as expansive as it was in the film, the Warrens did study the case and concluded that it was an authentic haunting. Now, you couldn't record the dangerous, threatening atmosphere inside that little house, Ed Warren later said, but you could film the levitations, teleportations, and dematerializations of people and objects that were happening there. Not to mention the many hundreds of hours of tape recordings made of these spirit voices speaking out loud in the rooms. In total, over 30 people also claim to have experienced some kind of paranormal event during the Enfield haunting. They included reporters, police officers, lawyers, psychic researchers, and of course, the Hodgson family. But not everyone was convinced that the Enfield poltergeist was real. Some believed that Janet and her siblings faked the entire thing. To some, the Enfield haunting was nothing more than an elaborate prank. Skeptics claimed that Janet made up the voice of Bill Wilkins herself and that her mother encouraged her for attention and for fame. Perhaps most damning, investigators once caught the children bending spoons. Janet admitted to doing that, but said that she and her siblings were just trying to see if anyone could tell the difference. And Janet insists that they faked paranormal events just 2% of the time. The family's defenders also point out that Peggy Hodgson had nothing to gain from spreading the story. Checkbook journalism, as the Daily Mirror photographer Morris put it, simply didn't exist at the time. So they weren't rich enough, these papers, to be handing out loads of money.
hmm
It actually caused more hassle, I suppose, being in the
yeah,
paper. In any case, the hauntings trickled to a mysterious end in 1979. Though the family say they sometimes experience slightly strange things after the haunting, like odd noises, nothing extreme happened in later years. That said, their chilling experience has stuck with them to this day. It stays with you every step of the way, Margaret said. It's just like a death, really. It gets a little bit easier as time goes on, but the fear and the memories of it and what happened never leave you. And Janet, who experienced most of the hauntings, dismisses the view of skeptics who say that she and her family made up the Enfield haunting. I don't care what they think, Janet said. I know what happened and I know it was real. So there's a lot to discuss on this one. What do you
Hmm.
think?
I think it's probably got one of the biggest shots of being like one of the
Hmm.
real ones because of so much that happened. And I mean, she can make some stuff up,
Yeah.
but chucking tables across the room in front of the police and stuff, not really, especially for the time, like in the
Hmm.
1970s. So unless the police were in on it, like they can't exactly fake that, can they?
Putting my skeptical hat on, and again, I'm only going from what I've seen on film and recreations on TV. When the police arrived, it was really dark in that kitchen, and there was four kids. Could they not have been one of the kids under the table?
Chuck a table across the room.
No, it wasn't chucked across. I think that was exaggerated. Was it not just moved across the room? Don't think it was chucked across the room.
All right,
It was just literally like a chair moved on its own. Could there not have been a kid?
I suppose I
Do you know
just
what I
kicked it
mean?
across. Yeah,
And I'm
if it
not.
was dark enough. Yeah.
They were very poor. They were a very poor family, and I don't think the dad was on the scene. And I can imagine four children, and not to be stereotypical, but Janet was a middle child. Could she have just felt really overlooked and really wanting some attention, and that gave her the perfect way to get it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe again, but because she's obviously admitted to faking at least a couple of things, it just chucks the entire thing
Yeah.
out the air, really, doesn't it? Like, if they've faked one thing, could they have
Then
faked
why would,
everything?
yeah, and
Hmm.
I can imagine the kind of kids I can imagine being like, oh, we'll keep going and see how much more we can get away with.
Hmm.
And also they haven't mentioned him here and I can't remember his name, but there was another guy who was a well known, really respected scientist, I think, or some kind of paranormal scientist. Do you remember him? And he came to work with a family, and his son on this documentary we recently watched pretty much said, look, we had a
That was the journalist.
no, it wasn't.
What I thought it
I
was.
think he was called Morris as well, but the journalist's second name is Morris. I think this guy's first name was Morris. But anyway, this Morris man, I think he's called Morris. He had a daughter called Janet who died in a car accident, and he
Hmm.
was absolutely devastated by this. And this guy's son pretty much said because his sister died, the dad just really wanted to believe that there was something after life.
Yeah,
And I think he got a special bond with the daughter Janet, which you can understand in like a fatherly way.
yeah,
And apparently people say that he really overlooked some things that he shouldn't have as a professional that were really obviously fake, but he really wanted to believe it.
yeah. It just took it all out of the
Yeah.
air, isn't it?
But they're saying that they did try lots of different ways to disprove it. They made Janet sit with water in her mouth and she was still able to do the voice and pronunciate well and things. So that's
Maybe lots of practice.
and I don't know if you've heard the voice for an 11-year-old girl to make that voice. It's really guttural and deep. Could be done, but it's really scary.
Yeah.
Oh,
I,
and sorry,
I
you
was
go.
just going to say, I think of all of them, I think probably has one of the highest chances of being real.
I was just going to say quite amusingly. Can you remember the one the documentary? It said that this Bill Wilkins guy, when she was using his voice, she would just swear all the time
Mm.
because she'd get away with it.
Yeah, I get
Yeah,
lots of swearing in
just
when
gonna
I
every.
can't be told off for it.
That's it. It's not me. It's Bill. So, and just really quickly before we move on to another famous case, did you know that the Stanley Hotel, which The Shining's based on, apparently they've got a poltergeist as well that throws things around?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so cool story.
Uh,
Okay, so we're going to move now to America. So this is the Herman Poltergeist. I got this story from the Spooky Stuff blog, and I haven't heard of this one. Have
no,
you?
no, not at
No.
all.
So, well, the movie Poltergeist isn't about an actual poltergeist. It drew inspiration from real life events. I think you'll find this one quite amusing. The Popper Poltergeist plagued the Herman family in 1958. We have actual police reports and even an investigation from parapsychologist J.B. Ryan of the Ryan Research Centre. So let's take a deep dive into this case and how it inspired the blockbuster hit just a few decades later. The first thing to address is that this situation happened in 1958. This was very much the age where people did not talk about their paranormal experiences in fear of being shunned by the community. Yeah, but
Shun.
it's important to mention that because I think in the 80s and onwards, people were really confident to say these things had happened, but then you would have just been so absolutely not. I think that they'd probably think, let's just keep that to ourselves.
Getting dragged off to the asylums.
Yeah, it wouldn't, which actually is our next episode next week. Nice
Glorious.
link. So on February the 3rd, 1958, in Seaford, New York, which is Long Island, patriarch of the family, James Herman, came home one day to his family telling him an extraordinary tale. Herman's wife, Lucille, said that after their children, also named Lucille and James, God, that's a bit confusing.
You know.
So they've got
Imagine
there's
shout,
the parents.
imagine shouting the name in the house.
Yeah, it's crazy. After their children came home from school that day, they heard popping noises coming from different places around the house. When she and the kids investigated, they found that several common household substances were uncapped and placed upside down. The bottles were also hot to the touch. It's a bit random
Yeah,
place,
we'll
isn't it?
go, because being a pest.
Bottles included things like shampoo and bleach, and also these caps had to twist to come off. It's time to mention that the children were in their teens and preteens. I should also mention that Lucille was 13 years old and James, or Jimmy, was 12 years old. What was even more disturbing was that a bottle of holy water had been spilled on the dresser. Remember, this was 1958. When James heard this story, he told his family to stay calm and also don't tell anyone. He tried to explain the phenomenon with science. Perhaps there was some chemical reaction causing the caps to pop off. So that's quite sensible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Straight in there with a level head.
yeah, instead of being, scared straight away.
Which which one was this that said that?
The dad, when he's come, basically he's come home and the mum and his wife and the
I was
two
gonna
kids
say,
are
is it the
panicking.
sun? No.
Oh no, we're going to call the son Jimmy.
Right, right.
You know what we'll do? We'll call the son Jimmy and the daughter Lucy. Then we've got Lucille and James as the parents.
Yeah, good idea.
So, just 5 days later, the popping sounds happened again, but this time James was home. At first, he suspected Jimmy was behind the incidents because Jimmy was a big fan of science. James observed Jimmy closely and was baffled when the caps were still popping off the bottles. When he investigated, he too found that several bottles were uncapped and turned upside down, and Jimmy hadn't been near them. This time, James called the police. So that's a bit dramatic. He started off really
I
sensible
know. I
and
started off quite sensible. Like it could just be signs, the heat could be making them pop off, and he went straight from that to call the police.
excuse me, sir, what's the
Uh,
emergency? I've got some bottles of bleach.
aye,
They're all over the
the
flat.
lid coming off, man.
It's chaos. What is interesting is that the dispatched officer also heard the popping sounds and saw the upside down bottles. The house was investigated several more times by police and Detective Joseph Tozzi. I'm being funny, but how have they got the resources to get detectives out?
You know.
If this was here, they wouldn't even entertain it. We'd be
Aye,
on a waiting list for 12 months.
bottles popping up there, popping off and stuff.
I'm going
Like,
to get some police
get the
time.
detective down there, man.
Let's get the FBI. Explanations like a deteriorating house or family pranks were explored but were later ruled out. There was no obvious nor easy explanation for the occurrences, much to the Herman family's frustration. James still had suspicions and blamed the occurrences on his teenage kids. The incidents were soon named Popper.
I suspected the kids.
You would, to be
Those
fair.
kids again, man.
Yeah.
Those kids.
So, nationwide coverage. The story went public. Incidents were also televised. It became a media sensation. Remember, this was 1958 and these things didn't happen. Or if they did, you didn't tell anyone. I have to wonder what James thought of all that. Soon, advice was pouring in from all over the country. The story even made the cover of Life magazine. God, was there that little going on in
Apparently
1958?
so, aye. Well, that's happening. The bottle tops are popping
This
off.
is crazy. There's no world without Kardashians.
That's it,
Yeah,
aye. That's it.
there's no news.
Nothing to fill up the news.
Yeah, the Herman family became a media icon. Gosh, their story was covered publicly on multiple news outlets. Yeah, so since going public, the incidents at the Herman house only got worse. A cousin of the Herman family, Maria Mertha, visited. I assume it was a form of moral support for the reason why she came. She too heard the popping noises and saw that the teenage kids were in another room on the other side of the house. So teenage pranks were officially ruled out. What was also troubling was that the phenomenon was starting to target bottles of holy water. Detective Tozzi connected the family to Father William MacLeod of the Church of St. William the Abbot. The Hermans were also Catholic, which explains the presence of holy water in the house. James, concerned for the safety of his family, moved the Hermans away from the house for the time being. They definitely needed a break. But when the Hermans returned, the activity came back. This time it came back with a vengeance. Larger and heavier items were now being moved, upturned, and more. Need to call the army.
Yeah, police clearly aren't doing enough about those bottle tops popping off.
It's
Again,
escalated.
let's get in the big guys.
So, the investigations. Detective Tozzi heavily investigated the case. When the heavier objects started moving, he contacted. Oh gosh, I didn't even read this. He contacted the nearby Air Force. You can't make this up. He contacted the nearby Air Force base to see if they had been see if there'd been tests being conducted that might have caused a sonic boom. So maybe,
It's a lot of sonic
yeah,
booms. It's
that's
happening that
crazy. That
much.
a sonic boom would surely that would rip the car bonnet off, not just pop bottles and stuff.
Not necessarily, depends on how heavy it was, but I'd
Oh,
imagine like
okay.
the house would have shook a bit if bottle tops were coming
They
off.
wouldn't just be in their house
Yeah.
unless they lived in a remote area. But anyway, that was soon debunked. Robert Sider also investigated the case with dowsing rods and said that there were streams under the house creating a magnetic field. Detective Tozzi looked at geological records and found that there were no streams under the house. About a month later, J.B. Ryan of Duke University was on the case. Ryan concluded that the presence of two hormonal teenagers created some sort of poltergeist activity or telekinetic events. Apparently, there was some conflict between James and Ryan's team as well. What is really interesting is that shortly after Ryan and his team arrived, the incident stopped around March the 10th, 1958. This is a common thing with poltergeist cases. Once the agent, or in this case the two teenagers, becomes aware that they are the centre of the activity, it stops. So that's really interesting. They do say that poltergeist ghosts are attracted to teenagers because of all the hormones, and they don't have a clue that they're actually generating this, that it's not actually a ghost at all. Some people say it is a ghost who's feeding off the energy. Some people say it's actually like telekinesis, like Matilda. Think of Matilda, but
Right.
like a more malevolent version of Matilda.
Which one's more likely to believe? Ghosts or
Uh,
telekinetic powers?
well, they're both paranormal, I
Yeah,
suppose.
I think that you enroll in X-Men Academy.
Yeah, so apparently when you become aware of this, it stopped because you maybe get a bit of control
Hmm.
back. I don't know. So the teenage daughter, Lucy Herman, appeared in the documentary Real Fear, The Truth Behind the Movies on Chiller. She was also interviewed by HuffPost Weird News. Lucy admitted that she never saw the movie Poltergeist because she had lived in her own nightmare during that time. According to her, the incident stopped when her family moved away. While this situation seems like it happened over the course of at least a year, it was only 5 weeks. 5 weeks seems like a lot of time. During those 5 weeks, over 70 incidents were recorded.
The detective really had his work put in, didn't he?
Yeah, huh? And they became famous in five
I
weeks.
know.
God. I wonder when James took the family out of the house for their short break, did the incidents continue? I haven't found much info on what the family did outside of the home. If it was poltergeist phenomenon centered around the two teenagers, I wouldn't be surprised if the activity followed them. Lucy, the daughter, didn't report any activity after leaving the house. So then it makes you wonder what else was going on. Or perhaps all of the police visits and nationwide media attention had perhaps escalated the activity because it was causing stress to the family and the two teens. Or perhaps Lucille, the mother, was going through the menopause at the time. Menopause has also been linked to poltergeist activity. Or maybe between the hormonal stress of the two teenagers, plus mom maybe going through the menopause, there was a lot going on to contribute to the activity. It should be noted that the activity often happened while Jimmy was alone. Plus, Jimmy was around 70% of the time when the incidents happened, so maybe he was the source. So lots of different theories there, lots of hormones going on because the man potentially, I mean, a bit presumptuous, but potentially she was of menopausal age,
Hmm.
and the two teenagers are obviously going through puberty. So, but seems to be based on Jimmy, the son.
It's a bit ridiculous though to be making like stuff move around about like in the house.
Yeah, I think this might be another case of
The kid doing it.
yeah, I don't want to lay blame on him. I don't know the people obviously, but you know,
It seems the most
my
logical
brain goes to
solution. If he was there
kids.
70% of the time,
Yeah,
like he could have done it before he left and stuff. I mean,
I'm not being funny as well. And look at Janet from the Enfield Haunting and this kid Jimmy. If you did this as a joke and all of a sudden you are famous, it's going to be tempting to keep that going.
and make it worse.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
at the beginning, it was just top spot. Like he might have just been doing that, like and not thinking about it. And when his dad started
Yeah,
kicking off, he might have thought, "Oh, this is funny. I'll continue doing it."
exactly.
But then, obviously,
I do think though as well the fame because you've got to think 1958. You're looking at post-war. You come to the 60s. I think people like Elvis, I mean, fame was celebrity culture was starting to take off massively.
yeah,
So I can imagine that. So we'll just finish off by saying Popper versus the movie. As you can probably tell, the 1982 movie Poltergeist was loosely based on the Hermans and very loosely based on actual poltergeist phenomenon. Basically, the Herman story laid out the basic framework of a family being plagued by an unseen force, but that's it. Their home wasn't built on a former cemetery where they moved the headstones, not the bodies. So yeah, it was loosely based on the film, but that is pretty much all it's got in common.
Hmm.
It's not like it's not like the Enfield Haunting that which was closely
Yeah,
adapted in line of
very,
events.
very loosely.
I think also it's quite a helpful ghost at first, just opening bottles.
Was that helpful?
Well, apart from leaving them upside down, just might just be
I mean,
like,
it's not helpful taking the top off.
have you ever came? I don't know if they have this in America, but we have child locks in this country. Find a child lock very challenging. I do. Do you not?
Well, they're just any sort of bottles, though, aren't they? Like that
Yeah,
he was
but
taking them off.
they've got difficult locks on bottles of bleach here for to
There's
stop kids
kids in
from
the
getting in.
house.
What?
There's kids in the house.
Which,
Yeah, they were teenagers, but like,
yeah,
if he's taking child locks off. Imagine if there
yeah.
had been a child in the house.
Oh, I'm with you. Okay, yeah,
Not
but it's
helpful at all.
yeah, but the teenagers, they're not three. They're not going to go and drink bleach.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying if there was a child in the
Well,
house.
if they'd help me if I ever got stuck opening a bottle,
I'll start doing it if you want. When I'm
just
walking around
not
the
leave it
house,
upside
taking
down.
lids off things.
If you do that, I'm going to call the police. That's one option. You
Escalated
rest of it.
straight up to the army.
And then, but yeah, the Navy will come in. The Navy, because of that much water on the floor.
Oh.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up with one really quick little recount of a poltergeist. Again, this one is set, it's historical. We're going back to the 50s and we're going to go back to England. So in January of 1956, 15-year-old Shirley Hitchings of number 63 Wycliffe Road in Battersea, London, discovered a silver key sitting on her pillow. Her father tried the key in every lock in the house and it didn't fit. Little did the family know that this was the beginning of a chain of seemingly supernatural events that would torment them for 12 years. They even nicknamed the ghost Donald. Donald moved furniture, wrote notes, and even set objects on fire during his reign of terror. Move over, Mr. Boots. We've got a new guy in town.
Donald's
Donny,
arrived.
Don, the Don. At the centre of the case, again, was another teenager, 15-year-old Shirley, whose teenage years were consumed by the poltergeist and who was suspected by many of having a hand in the mysterious goings on. At its height, the terrifying case of the Battersea poltergeist attracted international attention, and today it continues to puzzle sleuths around the world. As time went on, activity within the house became more extreme. Multiple witnesses claimed to have seen bed sheets flying off beds. Again, very helpful if you're changing the beds.
But if you're not changing the beds, not
Not
at
very
all.
helpful. Slippers walking around on their own accord, clocks floating through the air. Sounds like a dolly painting.
Oh.
Pots and pans being thrown across rooms and chairs moving around the house. In a handwritten letter dating to May 1956, Donald identified himself as Louis Charles, the short-lived Louis XVII of France, who was rumoured to have escaped captivity during the French Revolution, rather than dying a prisoner aged 10, as was later proved. So, a bit of background on that one, because I'm a massive history geek, and this is actually one of my favourite periods of history. So, in the French Revolution of the 1790s in France, there were loads and loads of nobles, including the royal family, who were executed publicly. What the son, who I think was something like at age 10, he was imprisoned. He wasn't executed, but he died in prison, and it was covered up, and they said it was because he died of illness or maltreatment in the in the prison. Sorry, but some people think he actually escaped and lived a different life elsewhere.
Mhm.
So very random that a 15-year-old girl would know this unless she's really into her history, because it's not taught in British schools. I wouldn't have thought it's French history.
Yeah,
It's taught maybe to a higher level, but I wouldn't have thought a 15-year-old. So it's very random. This
yeah, definitely.
is,
Yeah,
isn't it?
especially with it being in the 50s. It's not like you just go on Google.
Yeah, I think it's very random. So Donald, or Louis XVII, used a number of elaborate French phrases in his letter and claimed that he had drowned en route to exile in France, in England. His story, however, however fascinating, was often changing and contradictory. So I get the feeling that this girl was maybe a bit of a bookworm, and like me, she had a bit of an obsession with like French culture and history, and just come across this story and really felt for this little boy, and she's concocted this story.
I wonder what made her come up with the name Donald.
No, the family named him Donald.
Oh, right.
The family coined the name Donald. Maybe I can imagine as a mum and dad, they kind of take a bit to maybe make it less scary, a bit of humour. You know what I mean?
Donald's chucked the sheets
Donald
again.
Duck, yeah. This one, I'm going to finish on this fact because it's really amused me, and this to me tells you that this wasn't real. So Apparently, Donald was infatuated with a male actor of the day, a very famous actor, and he constantly threatened the family, saying that I will do more bad stuff if you don't get this actor to come and meet me.
That sounds familiar, this bit, actually.
Yeah, so it's just funnily enough, the actor that Donald was apparently infatuated with, there was a huge poster of this actor on Shirley's wall, and she was also infatuated with this actor. So think about, I don't know, an actor, who's an actor of today that people maybe, Chris Hemsworth, so a really good looking male actor, that's the equivalent. And she was pretty much saying, if you don't, get him to come to
Get him to
Battersea,
come, yeah, things are
London,
going to get worse.
yeah, I mean, I can imagine trying that with Brandon Flowers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When like, if you don't get Brandon to come here, there's going to be bleach all over this floor.
Yeah. We're really going to have to bring in the army.
Yes. So what do you think then? Let's wrap it up.
Um, I, I mean, that one's just, don't believe that one at all, to be honest. I think
Would it
she's
be
probably
easier?
just made it up.
Yeah, would it be easier, sorry, for me to give you some theories and you can react to
Come
them?
on then.
So a few theories for poltergeist activity is number one, they are clever hoaxes, often by children for attention with the use of trickery.
It's up there. That one's
Yeah,
up there, yeah.
because you think about we've said about the fame and the attention from the parents and other adults and nationwide coverage. Number two, there's a theory about puberty. This links to the above stories, all of them actually, that energy manifests with hormones during puberty. Often teenage girls can generate this phenomenon.
No, I don't agree. I don't believe that one at all. I mean,
Mm,
it happens all over the world, like every day. Surely there'd be more stories like this of stuff like that happening if that was the case. It was if somebody had triplets.
I believe this because I've said this before, and I'm no scientist, as you probably tell, but there's a big theory about we don't know the true extent of our power as humans, that we only use a certain, like, really tiny percentage of our brain. And when people say they've got a sixth sense, I believe, now don't laugh, I do believe I've got a little bit of a sixth sense. I do. I don't know, like, now I mean tiny. There's times when I'll just pick my phone up and the phone goes. It's usually the phone, or I'll just think about something and then someone mentioned on the TV. And I don't think it's supernatural. I think we've all got it. And some people, like mediums, can unlock that to a massive extent if you believe in that kind of thing. So could it not be possible that all this hormonal energy could create power outside of our consciousness?
No.
Well, that was a sound
Uh,
argument. I think so. I mean,
well,
that's what I think
fair
so.
enough. I don't agree with it. I think there'd be lots more instances if that was the case.
But maybe this is just like a really extreme case and it's very rare. Like you get rare disorders and things. Could this not be a rare case of puberty? I don't know. Number three, natural causes. This one's quite believable. That actually things like creaky floorboards, water under the house causing objects to become displaced and move, hallucinations and hysteria. So people maybe who've been taking medications or the poorly and they see things and then the house itself is
Especially when it's
malfunctioning.
like dark and stuff, and people say
Yeah,
like the
exactly.
dark plays like your mind plays tricks on you when you're in the
Uh-huh.
dark and stuff like that. So I agree with that. I like that one. Natural causes, maybe stuff making it happen.
hmm Last one, probably the least believable in my opinion, but maybe you disagree. That actually are angry, vengeful spirits who've passed over and aren't quite ready to let
I think that's more believable
activity
than number
go.
two.
Do you? Oh, I don't. I think that's more supernatural, really, where the other one's
I
more
think if you
scientific.
believe in number four, you probably believe. Sorry, if you believe in number two, you should probably believe in number four.
Mm.
Equal sort of thing. If people can manifest powers,
Yeah, but they're
then
alive. They're alive and kicking, so they can manifest these powers where these are dead ghosts. I don't
well, yeah. But
dead
if
ghosts. Dead people who are
if
ghosts.
you get energy manifests through like that, like hormones and that sort of stuff, surely
hmm
and energy would manifest through death as well.
Potentially. So out of the four of them theories, which one are you going to go for?
Um, be one or three.
Okay. I think number one,
Probably
it's
number
clever
one.
hoaxes by kids who are looking for attention, which is quite sad.
Maybe the hoaxes took off a bit too much, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to go with
They,
this now.
yeah, oh, my parents
Gonna
are
get
absolutely going to
wrong
kill
when they
me.
find out about
I'm going to be
this."
grounded forever.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it there. So thanks so much for listening to this episode of Ghost Creatures and Scares. Oh my.
Please make sure to leave us a review and let us know what you thought of today's episode. Feedback will really help us out, and we really want to know your thoughts to help us hone our podcast.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook just if you haven't already. And you can email us at ghostcreaturesandscares@gmail.com if you've got any supernatural tales you'd like to share or you just want to let us know what you think. Thanks so much again, and we'll be back next week to explore the gruesome history of asylums and hospitals with some disturbing real life spirits who haunt the long deserted wards.
Have a great week.